Hello, I'm Tan Tan the Tan Man. Welcome back to the Stupid Stuff Book Club. This is episode 2. Last episode, we were reading The Accidental Hero by Matt McClush. We read the prologue and chapters 1 and 2. Today we'll be reading chapters 3 and 4. I'm going to start chapter 3 now. Hope you all enjoy. Chapter 3, Shadow of the Roostoff. Jack woke up to the sound of rolling waves. He was confused at first, as people generally are when they wake up in strange places without warning. As he sat up in bed, it all came flooding back. The robo-zombie, the emissary, the blue giant, and the boat. This was no dream. He was really on the boat. This was really happening. Jack could feel the ship moving as he looked around the bedroom, or stateroom, as it was called on a sea vessel. Jack's vocabulary was filled with nautical terms he had learned from his pirate adventure in Starfleet comics. The stateroom was nicer than any room he had ever slept in, but Jack was too excited to stay in bed. He got up to explore the ship. Jack walked upstairs, wobbling a little as he went. He had never been on a boat before and needed some time to get his sea legs underneath him. He stumbled into the upper deck. The main room was empty. Worn burgundy leather couches and club chairs rested on honey-colored hardwood floors, and a classic globe turned slowly with the tides in an oak stand. Jack saw countless charts and maps spread out on tables next to various artifacts, or rolled up and tucked away in cubbyholes. There was a TV in the room, but it wasn't like any TV Jack had ever seen. Razor-thin holographic projection floating in mid-air just off the wall. Jack reached up to touch it. The screen rippled like a pool of water as his hand passed right through the light image. Sunlight poured in from sweeping windows that lined the walls and looked out on the open sea. There was no land on the horizon in any direction. Jack stepped forward through a full kitchen, or galley as he knew it to be called, and onto the bridge of the ship. The captain's chair sat empty before him. The golden floorboards at the helm were contrasted by dark wood that encased a high-tech computerized control panel. In front of that panel was an ornate wooden wheel that looked like it had been taken from an old pirate ship. Jack felt like he was looking at the future and the past at the same time. The readout on the panel flashed the message "Autopilot engaged" over and over. Jack wondered where everyone was before hearing voices outside the cabin. Voices talking about him, coming from upstairs. Behind him, a stairway wound up to the open-air top deck. Jack crept up slowly and silently, listening closely as he climbed the steps. "I can't believe you," Jack heard Blue say to Jason. "Why would I lie?" Jack crouched at the top of the stairs, just out of sight, to listen in. "I don't think you're lying," Blue replied. "But you said we were going to check him out, not bring him back. I can't believe you'd make a decision like this based on some random letter someone wrote you." "That letter was real," Jason replied. "It came from—" "You don't know if he wrote it or not," Blue said. "No one's seen him since the invasion. It could be a trick. I mean, isn't he dead?" "Don't say that," Jason said. "You don't know that for sure." "I know you're stirring up a storm," Blue said. "And you know what you're starting, too. Smart's not going to be happy when he finds out that you're bringing in somebody new. You, of all people." "Smart's never been happy his whole life," Jason replied. "And he's not going to be happy until he makes the entire imagination a police state. People are finally starting to talk about it. "I know," Blue said. "Someone has to stand up. I'm with you there. I just hope you're not using this poor kid to do it." Jack raised an eyebrow. He didn't like the sound of that. Jason scowled at Blue. "Do I tell you how to do your job?" "Yes, the proper way to punch somebody in the face or how to put your head through a brick wall." "The kid has a right to go home, Blue. No matter what anyone says, he deserves that much." Blue put a hand on Jason's shoulder. "I always back your play, partner, you know that. But what's right and what's popular aren't always the same thing. Even in the imagination, people get awful funny where the Rustov are concerned." "The Rustov just tried to kill him." Jason said. And when was the last time you heard of that happening? Blue asked. Rustov parasoldiers operating in the outside world? You'd have to go back to the invasion for that. The question is, what's next? 10 Rustov? 100? People back home haven't had to deal with those kinds of numbers in quite a while, and the fact is, they like it that way. If more of those things follow this kid back, it's going to be bad for him and you. What things? Jack asked, stepping out of the stairwell. Is that what you call the thing that came after me today? A Rustov? Jason and Blue looked up, taken totally by surprise. They traded embarrassed looks after being caught red handed talking about Jack. All right, Jack, Jason said. You're going to find out soon enough anyway. Have a seat up here and we'll tell you everything. Jack did as he was told, taking a seat across from Jason and Blue. I'm sure you have a million questions, Jason said. The fact is, so do we. Even by our standards, this has been a pretty unusual day. This morning you faced off against one of the baddest bad guys in the whole universe. What was that thing? Jack asked. A Rustov parasoldier, Blue answered. Alien invaders, nasty ones, too. I read about them today in a comic book, Jack said. Only they were called robo-zombies. They were fighting a hero called Prime. You know about Prime? Blue asked. Jack looked at Blue. He's real too? He asked. As real as the Rustov, Blue replied. I can see why you call them robo-zombies. Infected people usually end up looking like zombies by the time the Rustov are done with them. They're cybernetic parasites, Jason explained. Most people in the imagination are pretty scared of them. They infect other living organisms and use them as hosts, taking over their bodies and stealing their life energy. They can only survive on the backs of other life forms, and their victims turn into Rustov soldiers just like them. Jack thought it was all remarkably similar to what he had read about in the pages of Unreal Tales number 42. In my comic book, Prime was turning into one of them too, he told Jason and Blue. He started getting that mark on his eye, like the one they all have. You'll be glad to know that Prime is just fine, Blue said. But that's how it starts. That mark on the eye, that's the first sign of infection. The one that came after me. It didn't try to infect me, Jack said. It tried to kill me. I know, Jason said. It's strange and I can't explain that. What does all this have to do with me going to the imagination? Jack wanted bleh, Jack wanted to know. I told you about my job as an emissary, Jason began. How we go around the world planting clues about the imagination and looking for people who are developing superpowers. Well, 12 years ago, the Rustov invaded Earth. Ever since then, we've been discouraged from actually bringing any superpowered people back to our island. People are still very suspicious of outsiders back home. Hang on, Jack said. Superpowers? You really think I have superpowers? I know you do, Jason said without blinking. Blue agreed with Jason. You don't survive a Rustov ambush without a few superpowers, Blue said. Jack could hardly believe his ears. Even with everything that had already happened that day, he still couldn't quite accept he was a part of all this. He kept waiting for Jason and Blue to realize it was some big mistake. I didn't do anything this morning, Jack said. I didn't even try. I just ran. Where would I get superpowers anyway? Look, Jason said, not everyone has an obvious superpower origin. For every person who gets their powers from a lab accident or some magic amulet, there's another 10 people who just happen to be born with powers. People don't always know which category they fall into. They just know they have superhuman abilities. But I don't know that, Jack said. Yeah, weird stuff happens around me, but not because I'm doing anything. There isn't anything special I can do. Anyway, why bring me to the imagination if we're just going to get in trouble for it? I don't need to go someplace where everyone is going to give me a hard time. I could have stayed at St. Barnaby's for that. I'm bringing you there because I have a feeling about you, Jason said. You're special, Jack. You have to trust me on this. Standing right here, I can gauge your power level, and it's off. The charts. You have incredible potential. I felt it all the way from the imagination. Really? Jack asked. Mr. Calhoun said my potential topped out at a toilet brush cleaner. A toilet brush cleaner? Blue repeated, flabbergasted. What? That guy was a real piece of work, Jason said, shaking his head. You know, I used the Department of Departmental Affairs line on him. He asked Blue. You did not, Blue said. I did, Jack. Am I lying? Jack shook his head and smirked, and Blue busted out laughing. Jason followed suit, and eventually Jack did too. One thing about laughter, it's contagious. When Jason caught his breath, he turned to Jack with a smile. Don't worry, Jack. I've got a feeling the imagination is ready for you whether they know it or not. You've got a big future, a real big future, and it starts today. No doubt, Blue agreed. Anyone says otherwise, and I'll bring the pain. Right, partner? Blue added, tapping Jason with a little punch on the shoulder. Right, Jason said, wincing and rubbing his shoulder. We're partners now, too, Blue said to Jack. He put his fist back out for Jack to bump. Don't leave me hanging, little man. Come on. Jack smiled. All right, he said, and gave Blue's fist a pound. That's what I'm talking about, Blue said with a laugh, and he gave Jack a small pat on the back that nearly knocked him over the side of the boat. That evening, Jack watched the sunset from the bow of the Vision's forward deck. Out there on the ocean, the view was like nothing he had ever seen before. The whole sky was filled with an orange and red glow that lit the clouds from behind and made the colors spread out like finger paint. The sun was a golden coin sinking into an invisible piggy bank somewhere far beyond the horizon. The warm breeze on his face and the soothing sound of gulls squawking in the distance was quite a change from the icy gray weather he had observed from his window that morning. Shouldn't it be colder out here this time of year? He asked Jason. This boat travels faster than you think. We've made some minor modifications to her, Jason said with a wink, as the Vision's powerful motor hummed along smoothly. Blue can't stand the cold, so he sped us out to warm waters while you were sleeping. We're somewhere in the Caribbean now. Is that where the imagination is? Jack asked. It is right now, Jason answered. It's hard to say where the imagination is, though, because it never stays in one place for too long. It's what we call a roaming island. It moves? Jack asked. The whole island, Jason said, nodding. All around the world, constantly. It never stays in one place long enough for people to simply stumble upon it. If you want to find the imagination, you have to really go looking. And people do. Or at least they did. Jason gave a disappointed look. People used to come from all over the world, each bringing along their own culture, their own style. When the island was close to China, when it was close to England, when it was close to Guadalajara, people from those places would seek out the imagination. But you said you have to believe in it to get there, Jack said. How did they even know to look for it? It wasn't always such a big secret, Jason explained. Before our time, the legend of the imagination used to be a lot more widespread. Emissaries did their jobs back then just like we do now, but back then a lot more people took notice. In the age of exploration, during the Enlightenment, back then people had ambition. They had a sense of adventure. And today? Jack asked. Today's different, Jason said, staring out the s- Jason said, staring out at the setting sun. He looked sad, like he was watching the sun go down on something he cared for very deeply, something nearly gone. It doesn't help when emissaries only do their jobs halfway either, Jason finally added. We haven't closed the borders yet, though. By law, anyone who finds the imagination on their own is welcome on our shores. And people still do find the island. They find the clues, they hear the stories, and they come. It's not like it was before, though. Somewhere along the line, people just stopped believing. That's a shame, Jack said. It is, Jason agreed. But there's always tomorrow. We may not get as many visitors as we used to, but the people who come still go on to do amazing things. I'm not just talking about people with superpowers either. I'm talking about writers, musicians, philosophers, people you've probably heard of, people who changed the world. But if there are really superheroes and other stuff out there, how come I've never seen them or read about them? Haven't you read about them? Jason asked. Yeah, in comic books, but not in the news. Wouldn't that change things? Wouldn't more people believe? We have people who make sure we stay out of the news, Jason said. Don't get me wrong, I absolutely dream of a day when every man, woman, and child believes in the imagination, but we can't serve up proof on a silver platter. The world isn't ready for that. People have to discover it for themselves. We see the world with the fantastic and new to change it little by little, day by day. Jack leaned forward on the railing and watched the waves roll by. Do I have family in the imagination? He asked. Do they know about me? Are they superheroes? I don't want to get your hopes up, Jack, Jason replied. Your parents might be there and they might not. There's a lot of different ways you could be tied to the imagination. Like what? Jack asked. Could be your parents were normal people from New Jersey with distant relatives who come from the imagination, Blue called out from over at the wheel of the ship. Or you might have one parent who's a superhero and another one from the outside world, Jason added. Then again, maybe they're both superheroes, and they're flying around the Empire City right now, Blue said. Of course, if that's the case, I gotta wonder how you ended up in New Jersey with the Roostoff chasing after you. Jason put his hands up. We could do this all day. You're a mystery, Jack, but that's all about to change. First priority when we get to the imagination is to run a DNA scan and find out everything we can about you, starting with your name. My name? Jack asked. Can we really do that? As soon as we get there, Jason said. That's a promise. Assuming, of course, you still want to go. Are you kidding? Yes, I want to go. I can't guarantee it's going to be easy all the time, Jason warned Jack. Are you sure you're ready to deal with it? With all of it? Jack thought about what Jason had said about the imagination not being very welcoming to new visitors at the moment. That meant Jack's future was every bit as uncertain as his past. But he thought about the past he did know, about life at St. Barnaby's with the likes of Mr. Calhoun, Mrs. Theedweck, and Rex. A chance at something better had to be worth the risk. It had to be. Going back isn't an option, Jack told Jason. I'm ready. I'm in. Then what are we waiting for? It's time for you to take the wheel. Jack's eyes became saucers. You want me to drive? He asked. You have to drive. Think I just trust that big blue knucklehead to get us there? I heard that, Blue shouted. Jason laughed a little. Besides, he added, how can I make sure if you're. Blah. Jason laughed a little. Besides, he added, how can I make sure you believe if you're not the one driving us in? I don't know, Jack said, a little nervous. Machines and I don't usually work well together. Oh, I think you're doing okay, Blue said, giving Jason a wink. We haven't sunk yet, have we? Jason asked. Jack followed Jason to the captain's wheel where Blue was steering the ship. Blue stepped aside, but he kept one hand on the wheel. You believe, little man? He asked Jack before letting go. Jack thought about it. Just the idea alone made him smile. I do, he said. I believe in the imagination. Then take us home, Blue said, bowing in deference to the ship's new commander. Jack grabbed the wheel, and the ship lurched to the port side as he took the helm. Whoa, Jack said as he pulled the vision back, righting the ship. She was a big boat. Which way? He asked. You tell us, Captain, Jason replied. Captain, Jack repeated with a smile. This morning I wasn't even allowed on a school bus. This was by far the coolest thing Jack had ever done. Jack looked out at the ocean before him. They wanted him to find his own way to the imagination, and he had no idea where to start. Just follow your feelings, Jason said. We trust you. Trust yourself. Jack closed his eyes and let his heart tell him which way to turn. It wasn't long before he had a heading that felt good. When he opened his eyes and looked around, something felt different. The water seemed cleaner, the air seemed fresher, even happier if that was possible. The vision was surging over the waves, and Jack knew it was time to kick things up to the level. How do you make this thing go faster? He asked. Jason sat down and buckled up as Blue pointed toward a lever. That one, but Jack threw the lever to go full speed ahead, hurling the vision toward the horizon and sending Blue straight into the back wall. Jason laughed from the safety of his chair. But you might want to take it easy at first, Blue grumbled as he got up. Jack had never been happier. The boat was going so fast it was almost flying, and it wasn't breaking down. What's more, he seemed to be on the right track. After a little while, Jack started to see all kinds of clues that they were nearing the edge of the normal, ordinary world. There she blows! Jason yelled, pointing off the starboard bow at one such clue. Jack turned to see a giant blue-green dragon surface next to the vision and soar through the air. It was a long, beautiful, winding serpent with scales, fins, and a beautiful woman riding it. She had aquamarine skin and a glittering bright gold dress. She kept pace with Jack's ship for a time. She kept She kept pace with Jack's ship for a time, then waved goodbye and dove her mount back down below the waves. As they sailed on, they passed pirates, mermaids, and talking fish. Jack felt like he had crossed a line drawn between the normal world and the imaginary. Everywhere he looked, his own eyes confirmed that even if something was imaginary, that didn't mean it wasn't real. The walls between the possible and the impossible were breaking down, but the weather turned uglier the farther Jack sailed. Storm clouds started rolling in like angry spirits blocking out the sun. Jack could see them in the waters ahead, but he didn't turn away. Emboldened by his success thus far, he headed straight for the storm. Neither Jason nor Blue questioned him. Jack reached the squall, and within minutes, the sun was gone. Despite the hour, the sky turned black as night. Between the heavy rains and even heavier fog, Jack couldn't see anything. Still, he followed his heart. It had taken him this far. He just hoped it wouldn't take him to the bottom of the sea. The fog was thick like smoke from a fire. After sailing completely blind for a few minutes, Jack spun the wheel to his left on instinct alone and just barely dodged a series of huge rocks jutting out from the ocean floor, large enough to scuttle the ship in an instant. Before he could even appreciate how close he had just come to death, something told him to jerk the wheel in the opposite direction, and he did. He followed that impulse, just missing a shipwrecked boat that was dashed upon more jagged rocks. There was danger all around as Jack weaved through countless near misses in the fog, fighting the storm with nothing more than gut feelings and intuition. If Jason and Blue were scared, they weren't showing it. Their faces betrayed neither fear nor encouragement. This was all on Jack, and he steeled himself for what lay ahead. Throwing common sense out the window, he refused to change course. He was close, he could feel it. The storm raged against the vision as lightning crashed and waves rained down upon the deck. Hurricane winds rocked the boat as Jack sailed on blindly through the mist. Forward, he thought, to the heart of the storm, to the edge of the impossible, to the shores of the imagination, to clear skies? Without warning, Jack cleared the mist, leaving the storm completely behind. The water turned dead calm. With the setting sun nearly gone from the sky, the imagination came into view. It was an astonishing, impossible sight. The island floated in mid-air over the center of a ring of waterfalls, 1,000 feet in diameter, opening up like a giant hole in the ocean. The falls ran to the bottom of the sea, and the roar of the rushing water was tremendous. Cities, towns, and villages were scattered across the island's lush green face. Countless airships bustled about in the skies overhead, as well on uh, Countless airships bustled about in the skies overhead, as well as on the rocky bottom below. A giant translucent mountain with a razor sharp peak and a wide base hovered behind the island like a crystal shard dangling in the sky. As the last rays of the setting sun shone through, the crystal mountain became a prism that bent the sun's light in every direction, casting an image more beautiful than any rainbow Jack had ever seen. The massive, unstoppable waterfalls that surrounded the island roared with all the sound and fury of the seven seas. They called out to Jack, telling him that from this day forward, his life would be an extraordinary adventure. Jack had found his way. He belonged. It was every orphan's dream. All the answers to his questions, everything he ever hoped for, was waiting on that island. 12 years after he was born, his life was finally beginning. He didn't have the words to express what he was feeling. Jason only had two, but they were the right ones. Welcome home, he said. We're going to take a brief intermission. That was chapter 3. After we come back from the break, we'll be reading chapter 4.
Now we are ready to sail for the Horn. Way, herald, and go. Our boots and our clothes was are all in the pond to be rollicking randy dandy o. Heave a paw, heave away. Way, herald, and go. The anchor's on board and the cables are stored to be rollicking randy dandy o. Soon we'll be warping her out through the locks. Way, herald, and go, where pretty young girls all come down in their frocks to be rollicking randy dandy o. Heave a paw, heave away. Way, herald, and go. The anchor's on board and the cables are stored to be rollicking randy dandy o. Come breast to the bows, bullies heave away. Way, herald, and go. Soon we'll be rolling her down through the bay to be rollicking randy dandy o. Heave a paw, heave away. Way, herald, and go. The anchor's on board and the cables are stored to be rollicking randy dandy o.
And that was Ira, aka Fun Gun IV, with Randy Dandio. Welcome back from the intermission. We are going to be reading chapter 4, then we'll end it with some questions. Chapter 4, Empire City. Once Jack had had a moment or two to fully appreciate the mind boggling view that was the imagination, it sunk in very quickly that he was headed straight for the world's biggest waterfalls. Unless someone plotted a new course in the next few minutes, it wouldn't be the only thing to sink very quickly. Permission to take the helm, Captain? Blue asked. Permission granted, Jack said, immediately relieved. Blue stepped into Jack's place at the wheel of the ship, and Jason reached out his hand. Fine work, Jack, Jason said, giving Jack a vigorous handshake. That was impressive. Very impressive. You mean it? Jack asked. Are you kidding? You went straight through the heart of a white squall. Are you sure you've never captained a ship before? I'm sure, Jack said. Okay, I'll take your word for it, Jason replied. Blue, how are we doing? Old big fool, Blue said, reversing the ship's engines. Activating digital control panel now. Blue flipped a switch, and Jack heard a series of beeps as several keyboards and display screens started appearing all around him. They were all semi-transparent images, projecting reds, blues, and greens. Jack thought they were more like holograms, like the TV inside the ship. But when Blue started hitting their buttons, the images didn't ripple. They clicked. They were solid. Cool, huh? Blue said, noticing Jack's fascination. These are tangible digital images. They've got all the computing power of your basic tech, but they take up less space because they're holograms. We call them hard light hollows for short. Jack reached out to touch the controls. Can I? He asked. Be my guest. Blue replied. Hit that one. Jack hit the button that Blue had indicated, and a woman's voice announced, Hover mode engaged. On the main display screen, a schematic of the Vision appeared with sections of the ship's hull extending outward. Jack watched in wonder as hatches on the ship's extended panels slid open to light up with a blue glow, and the ship began to rise above the water. Once the ship was a good foot and a half clear of the Once the ship was a good foot and a half clear of the relentless current, the hull computer issued an alert beep, and the woman's voice declared, Hover modules fully deployed. Jack marveled at the futuristic technology all around him. Minor modifications, you said? He asked. Jason shrugged. More or less. Is this how we're going to get across the falls? Jason shook his head. The hover panels can only lift us about 2 feet off the ground. They have to be close to the surface or they won't work. We're going to need help to get across. Friendships at 10 o'clock, Blue said. Jack looked across the water and saw two small ships flying toward them. They were pod-shaped one-wing aircrafts, each with only enough room for one pilot. As they got closer, Jack could see a powerful mechanical arm below each wing. The glow of the tangible communication display grew brighter than the other controls, and an official-sounding voice crackled over the radio. Friendships Beta and Zulu hailing crew of the Vision, welcome home, emissary Knight. Do you require an escort? Jason tapped at a holographic button to address the incoming pilots. Thank you, gentlemen. That would be fantastic. We're ready whenever you are. Very good, sir, the voice replied, and the friendships swooped in and lined up next to the Vision, one on each side. The robot arms under their wings latched onto the ship and locked down tightly. Here we go, Jason said as the friendships fired up with their engines and lifted the Vision high into the sky. Within seconds, they were flying the boat through the air like birds gliding on a breeze. We call them friendships because they carry you wherever you need to go, Jason explained as they soared through the sky. There it is up ahead, Empire City, capital of the imagination. That's where we're headed. Twilight was setting in, and Jack got a good look. It was the most unusual city Jack had ever seen or even imagined. It was built on a hill that ran right up to the cliffside edge of the floating island, and Jack could see what Jason had meant when he said that people brought their own cultures and styles with them when they came here. Looking at Empire City was like looking at six cities crammed into one. Jason called out the different boroughs of Empire City, describing them for Jack as they made their approach. There was Galaxis, the futuristic spaceport, home to aliens from across the cosmos and beyond. Directly above that was Karateka, a singular fusion of modern and ancient China, where kung fu masters trained in martial arts disciplines long forgotten by the outside world. On the opposite side of the city, the walls of Varagog guarded Gothic castles, medieval villages, and ancient magic. Behind that stood the mysterious and ever-changing borough of Cognito, where the streets had no names and the residents answered no questions. Higher still were the smooth-lined towers of Higher still were the smooth-lined towers of Machina, shimmering with data bytes and binary code messages that only the androids who lived there could read. And in the center of Empire City, towering over the wide expanse of Season Still Park and the majestic monuments of Hero Square, were the mighty skyscrapers of Hightown, the tallest buildings in the world. As the evening sky took on a shade that was equal parts purple, red, and pink, the shining towers of Hightown responded with an opalescent reflection that was so beautiful it seemed to be singing the next verse in the sky's favorite song. This was Empire City, capital of the imagination, and Jack's new home. Below the edge of the city, built into the rocky underside of the island, was a hangar bay large enough for 1,000 ships to land. The friendships pulled the Vision in safely, and Jack was finally there. It was an exhilarating moment. The friendship escorts disengaged and waved goodbye as a team of men in gray jumpsuits rushed out to load the Vision into hover storage. Jack jumped down from the deck of the ship as the flight crew carted the Vision off for safekeeping. He couldn't stay inside the ship a second longer. He was too excited to stay inside of anything now that he had one foot in a whole new world. Holy cow, Jack said, looking around in wonder. The flight deck was filled with all manner of space-age shuttles, ultra-modern fighter jets, and flying saucers. Everywhere Jack looked, there were men and women wearing skin-tight supersuits and other brightly colored costumes, complete with capes and masks. They were flying off into the sky and landing under their own power, and that was just the beginning. There were people wearing jetpacks. There was a boy creating discs of light out of thin air and then throwing them like frisbees at his little brother until his mother told him to stop. There was a man made out of electricity talking a woman made out of solid rock. There was a ninja warrior arguing with a futuristic robot about a parking space. The myriad powers of everyone on the crowded flight deck were impossible to discover in a single glance around. Jack stopped dead in his tracks, hypnotized by the sight of it all. Jason snapped his fingers to get his attention and keep him moving. Jack, Jack, you okay? Jack snapped out of his daze. I don't believe it. If that were true, you wouldn't be here, Jason replied. Is everyone here a superhero? Jack asked. Not everyone, Jason replied, leading the way through the hangar. Remember, you don't need superpowers to find the island, you just need to believe. But you name it, we've got it. Ninjas, sorcerers, aliens, even a few so called regular people. Emissaries like me are supposed to bring the gifted here to the imagination, but not every gift is a superpower, Jack. And not every superpowered person decides to become a superhero either. They become supervillains? Jack guessed. I try not to use that term, Jason said. There are some real villains out there, sure, people who use their powers to do whatever they want, no matter who gets hurt. But some people who get labeled as supervillains are just misunderstood. Not everyone's looking to take over the world. Some people just don't want to be heroes either, Blue added. That's okay, it's a lot of pressure being a hero. Some people would rather just go on about their lives, like Gramps here. Blue gestured toward an old man carrying around a 2-ton jet, looking for a parking space. Coming through, the old man grumbled as he pushed past them. As Jack, Blue, and Jason walked to the other end of the flight deck, glowing letters that took the place of signs started scrolling through the air around them. They flashed out the words Hall of Records in an endless loop. Jack followed the signs through the cavernous hall. As he neared the other end, Jack noticed several flying surveillance cameras skittering about in the air. Eventually, they scurried over to him. Each one was about the size of a winged football, with Smart Corp written on the side in shiny blue lettering. Blue, smart cams, Jason said, pointing to the flying cameras. I see 'em, Blue said, reaching out to shove one away. Go bother somebody else, he muttered as the smart cam skidded through the air and bumped into one of its compatriots. Sorry, Jack, these things are everywhere lately, Jason explained. They're really annoying. The smart cam whirred around them with a series of angry, offended beeps, but kept its distance as they rode a turbo lift up to the records room. The Hall of Records was carved deep into the rocky interior of the island's base, and was even more crowded than the flight deck. It was a customs and security checkpoint just like in an airport, except instead of bustling tourists and passengers, it was jam packed with superhumans, robots, and aliens. There were giants who were bigger than Blue waiting in line next to monsters and people with 4 arms. The ceiling must have been at least 100 feet high, and Jack looked up to see superpowered flyers waiting in mid-air lines. Words continue to flow through the air, blinking out directions like resident aliens, returning citizens, and security checkpoint. Everyone was producing paperwork and going through security checks. There were big, transparent x ray panels at the head of each line for people to step behind, and Jack could see right through to people's skeletons. Jack and the others navigated Jack and the others navigated the crowd past winding lines of people, as well as advertisements that flashed off the walls like pop up banners from the internet, calling out Smart Corp, bringing you tomorrow, today, and Smart Corp, the future is now. Jason led the way through the great room with a swagger, and Blue swatted away smart cams that buzzed around like gnats. They made their way to a completely empty line next to the words New Visitors. The podium at the head of the line stood empty. Jason hit a signal light requesting service. You see how many new visitors we get these days, Jack? We don't even staff the line anymore, he said, shaking his head. Let's get started on the paperwork while we wait. Jason gestured to a row of glowing forms floating next to the line and snatched one from the air. When his hand touched it, it turned into a solid piece of paper with a blinking cursor flashing on the page. What's that? Jack asked. Smart paper, Jason said. He showed Jack an immigration form with blah blah blah. He showed Jack an immigration form with blank spaces for name, code name, age, date of birth, and other similar information. It's like a computerized sheet of paper. It's just as thin as regular paper, but you can edit it like it's still on a computer screen. You can highlight stuff, delete things, change fonts, whatever you want. It's another tangible. Smile, Jason said, holding the page up like a camera in front of Jack's face. A light flashed, and Jack's headshot was inserted directly into the top right corner of the form. This is awesome, Jack said, grabbing the paper to check it out. The back of the page read, Another Smart Corp innovation. What's Smart Corp? Jack asked. The biggest company in the world, Jason answered. They do business all around the globe, but under a lot of different fake names. You'd be amazed at who some of their front companies are. Tangibles and hard light hollows were invented by the owner of the company, a man named Jonas Smart. He also invented overpads, smart cams, maglev roads, and a ton of other things, Blue added. In addition to being the senior member of Empire City's inner circle, he also runs Smart Corp. These days, that means he pretty much runs Empire City. He must be a genius, Jack said. Do you think I'll get to meet him? Probably sooner than you think, Blue said, looking at Jason. The expression that Jason returned silenced the giant. Jason tried to fill out the form for Jack, but couldn't put in much. He didn't know Jack's real last name, birthday, or any family information. However, there was one section that they could try to figure out on their own, the description of superpowers. I don't know, Jack said, still somewhat skeptical. Trust me, I've spent a lot of time reading comic books and thinking about superpowers. A lot of time. And if I had any powers myself, I think I'd know about it. Not necessarily, Jason explained. Especially at your age. Depending on the power, you probably wouldn't even be deliberately controlling it. But in times of stress, excitement, or fear, there are flare ups. Jack thought about it for a minute. He had to admit that did sound like him. You said weird stuff happens around you, Blue said. Weird like what? Weird like this morning with the roost off? No, nothing like that, Jack said. Machines act funny around me. That's it. Maybe I make them break and stuff? I don't know, Jason said, stepping behind an X ray screen at the head of the line. The X ray panel revealed Jason's insides to be a mechanized system filled with millions of flashing lights and wires hiding underneath his skin. Something tells me that's not it. Jack nearly fell over when presented with a sight of Jason's electronic insides. You're a robot? Jack exclaimed. I'm an android, Jason replied. A bioengineered mecha with a human appearance. Here, check it out. Jason rolled up his sleeve and double tapped his inner forearm. Jack watched as short bursts of compressed air escaped Jason's arm and a panel of skin dropped down and slid away. Inside, a complex circuit board lit up like a slot machine. Jack latched onto Jason's arm and peered inside for a closer look. Jason's skin felt soft and natural, but there was no denying the hard steel frame and circuitry underneath. That's why you set off the alarms back at the harbor, Jack said, fascinated by Jason's inner workings. This is so cool. I can't believe you're a robot, he exclaimed. Android, Blue corrected again. Jason's an android. We call 'em mechas here in Empire City. And look at that, Jason said, pointing to a digital display near his wrist. It read that all systems were operating at 100% capacity. I feel fine around you, so your powers have got to be something else. Yeah, Blue added. Besides, you steered the vision like you've done it a million times before. That's a pretty big machine. That was weird, Jack admitted. It was like the ship just knew what I wanted to do. I was surprised that it came so easy, but I was too psyched to even think about it. Interesting, Jason said, thinking. Why didn't you tell me about being a I mean, android earlier? Jack asked. I didn't want to blow your mind, Jason said. You passed out when you saw Blue. I didn't know what you'd do when you saw this. This is the coolest thing ever, Jack said, sticking his hand behind the x ray panel to get a look at his own bones, then sticking Jason's hand in next to compare. Meanwhile, someone finally appeared behind the podium. It was time to get down to business. The customs clerk was a space alien whose skin had a gray and black quality that emitted a white glow. He looked like a black and white film negative. "Can I help you?" he asked in an annoyed tone. His voice had an echo-like reverberation that gave Jack the chills. "You can try," Jason replied. "Emissary Jason Knight." He flashed his badge. "I'm here to process this boy for entry into the imagination." The clerk paused a moment, as if he didn't quite hear Jason correctly. "A new visitor?" he asked. "That's right." "This line is not open, sir," said the clerk. He started to walk away, but Jason grabbed his wrist. "Then I suggest you open it," Jason said. "As far as I know, the borders of the imagination aren't closed." The clerk locked eyes with Jason for a moment, but quickly lost the staring contest with the emissary. He could see that Jason wasn't backing down. "No, sir. The borders are not officially closed," the clerk said, pausing to look up at the smart cam that was trained directly on him. He then leaned in toward Jason and spoke softly. "But it is our understanding that in these trying times, with the Rustov threat to our planet still lingering, that all emissaries have been discouraged from bringing new visitors to the imagination." "Interesting," Jason replied. "I guess I didn't get the memo. I've actually been encouraged to bring this boy here." Jason held up Jack's forms in front of the clerk. "Let's get started." The clerk still hesitated. "I'd do what he says if I were you," Blue said, bearing down on the clerk. "You see, I'm here with them, and I really don't have a lot of patience for waiting in lines." The clerk's lips quivered as he stared up at Blue. He reluctantly took the form and fed it into the screen of his hollow computer, grumbling about how he better not get in trouble for this. The page broke up into a million data bytes, then reassembled into proper order, projected in the air next to the podium with most of the information still missing. "Relax," Jason said to the clerk. "For all we know, this boy's a returning citizen. We don't have any info on his background. You're going to need to run a scan to find out who he is." "Put your finger there, please," the clerk said, indicating a red dot on the podium. Jack did as he was told, and a needle pricked his finger. "Ow!" he said, pulling back his hand. "It's just a little pinprick," the clerk said in a curt tone. "We need a drop of blood for the DNA scan. See? It's searching the database now." Jack looked up at the screen that displayed a single drop of his blood. It read, "Searching." "Can't believe this," Jack said. "Am I seriously going to find out my real name right now? I mean, what if I still have family here? I might have relatives at home." Jack held his tongue, forcing himself to say no more. But he couldn't help thinking about what else might be waiting for him in Empire City. There might even be a mom and a dad. A ding sounded and a light on the screen flashed green. "We have a match," the clerk said, a little surprised. Jack's heart leapt. "You do?" he exclaimed. "Really?" "Looks like you have been here before," the clerk nodded. "We'll just put up your birth certificate and wait a minute." Before the clerk could finish, the screen froze and started flashing red. The screen zoomed in on Jack's blood drop to reveal millions of tiny microchips floating inside of it. Jason and Blue leaned in toward the screen with confused looks on their faces. "Nanites in the blood?" the clerk exclaimed as he watched the screen in disbelief. "What the?" Jason said. "No, that can't be right." "What can't be right?" Jack asked. "What's going on? Where's my file?" "Legends Ghost!" the clerk gasped, clapping a hand over his mouth. He looked at Jack and his white glow intensified greatly. Jack got a real bad feeling in the pit of his stomach as the fear rose up in the clerk's face. "Hang on a second," Jason began. Don't, don't, don't." Jason stopped in place like a frozen computer as the clerk slammed his hand down on an alarm and screamed, "Rooster!" Head spun around from every direction as the alarm sounded. People shrieked in terror. Shock and confusion took over the crowd as the sirens wailed in the background. The orderly crowd in the Hall of Records devolved into a frenzied mob running for the exits. The room turned to chaos, and hundreds of people ran, flew, and teleported out every available door. Smart Cam zoomed in and started buzzing around Jack with flashing lights as an alarm blared over and over. Infection. Alarm. Quarantine. Infection. Alarm. Quarantine. I don't get it, Jason said, regaining his movement. I had a glitch. I never glitch. He looked at Jack. How can he be infected? Blue asked. Look at him, he's fine. What do you mean infected? Jack asked. What's happening? What about my file? Jason looked around and pulled Jack in close to protect him. I think we might have to wait on that, he said just before something blew a hole in the wall behind them. It wasn't an explosion. It was a man. When the smoke cleared, they were surrounded by a group of tough-looking superheroes and a legion of soldiers with laser rifles. I hate to say I told you so, Blue said to Jason, but I told you so. Jack, Jason, and Blue were taken to a secure room somewhere above the Hall of Records. It wasn't the worst room to be stuck in since it had a majestic view of the waterfalls that surrounded the island. Still, the team of supers that escorted Jack in there had no intention of letting him leave. They were called the Peacemakers. The Peacemakers all wore the same black supersuits, complete with the Smart Corp logo and different colors specific to each team member. While waiting, Jason and Blue explained to Jack that the Peacemakers were a private security force, not real police. They were founded as a resort of some ill-advised laws passed shortly after the Rustov invasion to ensure the security of the imagined nation. There were several peacemaker teams like this one, each with just enough authority to be truly dangerous. They were empowered to act as judge, jury, and executioner when it came to the Rustov. For obvious reasons, that didn't sit well with Jack. What are we doing here? Jack wanted to know. What's going to happen to me? Don't worry about it, Jack, Blue said. We just have to hang in here until Jason sorts this out. This is all a big mistake. It's gotta be. The only mistake was you thinking you could sneak a Rustov into the imagination, said Serge, the peacemaker team leader who was a human power cell. Instead of blood, he had pure energy coursing through his veins. He was so filled with power, it leaked out his eyes and mouth if he didn't release it. The red lines on his suit glowed brightly as his charge built up to full capacity. Harrier, the woman next to him, was a walking arsenal, a bionic commando with golden body armor, a winged jetpack, and more guns than any one person could possibly need. Finally, there was Speed Razor, a thin but super fast peacemaker with pale white skin and straight black hair that went down to his shoulders. His skin-tight black suit cut off at the forearms, revealing shiny silver hands with fingers sharp as knives. Jack decided he didn't like these peacemakers one bit. What are we waiting for? Speed Racer railed from across the room. The child is infected. Once the Rustov takes root, the host is already dead. Jack blinked, and the man across the room and placed his knife-like fingers to Jack's throat. We have to put him out of his misery, for his sake as well as ours. This is exactly what the Peacemaker teams were created for. He's not infected, Jason said, grabbing Speed Razor's shoulder. You touch one hair on that boy's head, and Blue is going to make sure you get a real close look at those waterfalls out there. Blue glared at Speed Racer. You think you're fast enough? Blue asked. Speed Racer scowled and dropped his hand away from Jack's neck. Too bad, Harrier observed. She fine-tuned the laser sights on an oversized gun. It would be a mercy. Says you, Blue replied. Don't pay 'em no mind, Jack. These peacemakers are just glorified rent-a-cops, if you ask me. Corporate mercenaries. Speed Racer smirked mockingly. Sticks and stones may break my bones. That sounds like a good idea to me, Blue cut in. You threatened Jack again, and I just might. You're not gonna do anything, Serge said. This is a Rustov matter. We outrank you here. You don't outrank Me, Jason cut in. Jack is a charge in my custody. He can't be touched, and you know it. As an emissary of the imagination, I can only be overruled by the inner circle on this. We call the inner circle, Serge said, his eyes gleaming with power. So, we'll wait until the circleman gets here, Jason said. Until then, stay on your side of the room. We'll stay on ours. Jack rubbed his neck where Speed Razor's blade-like fingers had scraped his skin. He was lucky to have Jason and Blue there to defend him. Jack was used to standing up for himself, but these bullies were a lot tougher than Rex Staples in his coffee breath. Jason, what's the inner circle? Jack asked under his breath. A group of very powerful beings, Jason answered. They're elected from each borough of Empire City to govern and defend the imagination. I think one of them might have wanted me to bring you here. With any luck, he'll get here before their boss does. Jason, what if they're right? Jack asked. What if the rooster from this morning infected me somehow? Can that happen? The door swung open and a smart cam flew into the room. Jason frowned. Presenting Circleman Jonas Smart, the smart cam announced, introducing a tall, gaunt man with a grim face, sunken cheeks, and dark circles under his eyes. He had unusually long fingers and black hair that was graying at the temples. His black one-piece suit made him look like a walking shadow, and his mood was no brighter. Jack wasn't so excited about meeting this man anymore. Hello, Jonas, Jason said, nodding a cold greeting to the circleman. Emissary Knight, Smart replied with the same lack of warmth. Smart took in the room slowly, rolling his eyes from left to right, and eventually settled on Jack. The look on his face sent shivers down Jack's spine. Smart leaned down to Jack's eye level and studied him with narrow, penetrating eyes, scrutinizing his face from several different angles. This is quite alarming, Emissary Knight, Smart began. His voice rang with a deep, rich resonance, like the sound of a purring cat. I always assumed that sooner or later you would attempt to challenge our informal border control policy, but I never once imagined that you would attempt to smuggle in a Rustov spy. Jack took offense at that. I'm not a Rustov Smart interrupted Jack by sticking a tongue depressor into his mouth. He held it open and shined a pen light inside to look around. Jack fidgeted as Smart moved onto his eyes, holding the lids open and shining the light into each pupil. He's not a spy, Jason said, taking away Smart's pen light and pulling Jack free of his clutches. But he is infected, Smart countered. Not a chance, Blue said. See for yourself, Smart said. He took out a pocket hollow computer and projected a lab report on Jack's blood into the air. The blood tests are quite conclusive. Jack watched with his heart in his throat as Jason crossed the room toward the holographic report and studied it for what felt like forever. Finally, Jason turned to him with a defeated look on his face. I'm sorry, Jack, was all Jason could muster. You're infected with a Rustov parasite, Smart added without feeling. I'm afraid there's no cure. All the color drained from Jack's face. His stomach went cold, like he had just swallowed a freezer full of ice. His mind reeled, and somewhere in the back of his brain, he started wondering just what ended up happening to Prime in the missing pages of Unreal Tales number 42. What does that mean, no cure? Jack asked, frantic. Am I going to die? Am I going to turn into a Rustov? How much time do I have? Very little, if I can help it, Smart replied. Speed Racer, if you don't mind. Speed Racer smiled, bared his claws, and started toward Jack. Whoa, whoa, whoa! Not so fast, Psycho, Jason said to Speed Racer, stepping in front of Jack. What do you think you're doing? Smart looked surprised at Jason's challenge, but he didn't miss a beat in responding to it. The law is very clear on dealing with the Rustov. Distasteful though it may be, the infected branch must be cut away before it endangers the tree. I don't know why you think this boy should receive special consideration. Open your eyes! Jason shouted. It's obvious Jack is a special case. Infected or not, he doesn't even have the mark of the Rustov on his eye. You know that whenever the Rustov infect a new host body, that mark is the first thing to appear. Jack doesn't show any signs of decay at all. The boy is quite a find. I can't argue with you there, Smart admitted. His infection almost appears to be in complete remission. He might even hold the key to a cure, Jason said. He could be the answer to defeating the Rustov. Yes, the boy promises to be extremely valuable to my work, Smart agreed. There's no denying that. Jack breathed a sigh of relief. After he is executed, I'm going to want him brought immediately to my lab. He needs to be dissected and studied extensively. Jack's relief quickly evaporated. Executed? Jason asked. Dissected? Jack added, his eyes bulging out of their sockets. Extensively? Blue said. You can't have him executed, Jason told Smart. Smart sighed. Emissary night. Where there is one Rustov today, there will be 100 tomorrow, he replied coldly. When the parasite is done with him, others will be next. It's elementary. Perhaps I should say. Perhaps I should have said, put to sleep. Would that have been more sensitive? I'm afraid I'm not very good at emotional expressions. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how you say it, Jack shouted. What are you, crazy? Smart rolled his eyes. What I am is the smartest living person on planet Earth. If my decisions confuse you, it is simply because you aren't smart enough to understand them. Now, please, adults are talking. I won't let you do this, Jonas, Jason said. This child is under my protection. Yeah, I have rights, Jack said. He paused to look at Jason. I do have rights, don't I? No. Oh, no. Smart scoffed. As far as the law is concerned, you died the second the infection took hold. You're an enemy combatant. You have no rights. He's a citizen of the imagination, Jason said. Check his record. I have. It's worthless, Smart replied. He used his pocket computer to project Jack's birth certificate into the air. Sure enough, the form appeared, but it was just scrambled letters and meaningless gibberish. It's your fault, you know. When you ran his DNA scan, the nanites in his blood corrupted the file with the Rustov technovirus. It's frozen, useless. We had to sever the infected file from the system so the virus didn't spread to the entire Smart Corp database. This child has neither a past nor a future. Jack grabbed the tangible image from the air to get a closer look. Smart was right. The file was ruined. You're a heartless jerk, Jason said. I'm quite comfortable with who I am, Emissary Knight. The imagination is at war, Smart declared. We must remain ever vigilant against our foe. I'd execute 1,000 children like him if I thought it would keep us safe. The imagination is a democracy, Jason countered. The entire inner circle has to vote on this, not just you. Smart scowled. Have a care, emissary, he told Jason. It isn't prudent for a mecha to side with a Rustov. There's a little too much history there, I should think. I'll take my chances, and so will Jack. Have it your way, the circleman snorted. It won't change anything. The law is very clear on this, and I haven't lost a vote at the inner circle since being elected nearly 12 years ago. You mean you haven't lost a vote since Stendavel disappeared 12 years ago? Jason said. I'm calling for a full circle vote. As an official in the Empire City Police Department, Blue here is a witness to that. The entire circle will be here tomorrow for Dedication Day. You're going to have to wait at least that long. Smart grinned a sickening grin. Fine. We'll finish this in the sphere, he said, then turned to Jack. This is a stay of execution, nothing more, he said in a frigid tone. Until tomorrow, I'll be waiting. He angled a long finger up to the floating smart cam. And I'll be watching. Smart left the room without another word. The peacemakers followed him out. Well, Blue said, that went well. Jason looked away, embarrassed. Jack looked up at the smart cam that was hovering over him, recording and broadcasting his every move. I guess I'd better get used to these things, he said. It turned out Jack was right. The smart cam followed Jack and the others out to Blue's hover car and up through the ritzy streets of Hightown. It trailed them past energy trains that ran up the sides of buildings and over highway bridges that crossed between soaring skyscrapers. Blue kicked the hover car into flight mode and blew the car by news nets that were broadcasting footage from the smart cam on floating billboards. The headlights declared, Rustov supervillain allowed to stay in Empire City. No one is safe. Impromptu interviews with Smart and his peacemakers condemning Jack as a Rustov threat played on giant floating screens. Everywhere, random super people flying through the skies or fighting one another in the streets over who knows what stopped what they were doing to read and watch the breaking story. Within minutes, the entire city knew about Jack's arrival. He was news. Big news. Rocketing away from the smart cam, Blue pulled the hover car up to the 437th floor of the Ivory Tower, an immaculate white building in the center of Hightown. The curved window of Jason's apartment slid open outside the dark core. The curved window of Jason's apartment slid open outside the car door. Jason keyed in a sequence on the dashboard and a hollow platform appeared below the car so they could safely get out. Jack said goodnight to Blue, who promised to see him in the morning. He told Jack to remember that he and Jason had his back. Jack thanked him and followed Jason into the apartment. All right, Jack, this is your new place, Jason said. What's mine is yours. Yeah, Jack said as he trudged into the building and into a posh living room. For one night at least. He plopped down on a couch. The emissary exhaled with a sympathetic air. It was amazing how well his android systems reproduced every human function and emotion. It's been a long day, Jason admitted. I know you haven't exactly received the warmest welcome, but it's going to be okay. It really is. Jack wasn't so sure. You know, back at St. Barnaby's, I always thought about what it would be like to be a superhero when I grew up, he said to Jason. I didn't dare say that to Mr. Calhoun, but I did think about it. Then when you told me about this place and about my superpowers, I started to think about it for real. Jack shook his head. I haven't even been here a full day and already I'm a supervillain instead. Hero and villain are both overused words if you ask me, Jason said. Not all heroes wear capes and masks, Jack. A real hero just wants to make a difference in the world. He gets out of bed in the morning and tries to make the world a better place, that's all. That's the kind of hero I try to bring back to the imagination. That's why you're here. You think I could be that kind of hero? Jack asked. Even with the whole Roostoff thing? I think you could be anything you want, Jason said. Now try to get some sleep. I promise you we'll take care of all of this tomorrow. Jack agreed that he was exhausted, and it was time to call it a day. He was soon off to bed in the guest room that Jason kept ready for visitors to the imagination. It was a sparsely furnished room, nothing too extravagant, but far nicer than anything Jack had ever known. He pulled the covers over himself, hoping things would really look better in the morning. As the smart cam bumped against the window, trying futilely to get inside, Jack had mixed feelings about this new home. He was free of St. Barnaby's. He had his own room in an apartment overlooking a wondrous city of superheroes, aliens, and magic. He should have been on top of the world. Sadly, even in a place like this, where nobody in the entire city could be considered remotely normal, Jack still couldn't fit in. He stared at the picture in his infected history file, quite certain that he'd never find out who he was. Jack lay in bed, his energy fading fast. The lights in the room faded with him. He was so incredibly tired after such a long day, he almost didn't notice the lights shutting off by themselves. But he did notice, and when he realized what was happening, it got him thinking about the lights in the library that morning. He thought about how he had been feeling when the lights had flared up and blown out. Next, he thought about that day when Rex had stolen his calculator and how he had been feeling when it had broken. Finally, he thought about how he was feeling right there in that room. He was tired, and the lights were going out. A completely different kind of light bulb switched on in Jack's head. He had it. His mind raced back through the rest of the day's events and more. Suddenly, it all made sense to him. He felt a burst of excitement, and the lights responded in kind, just like Jason had told him. Flare-ups. Jack couldn't help but smile a little bit as he drifted off to sleep. It seemed he recognized his superpowers after all. And that is the end of chapter 4. Now we move on to the questions segment. So, Ira, do you have any questions?
I don't really have any questions at the moment. I am really interested to see where this goes, though.
I know, right? What do you think of Smart so far?
I think he's cool. I don't know why. I picture every character as completely different as how they're described for some reason. Like I'm
Hey
still
man, that's the thing.
like I'm still picturing Jason as Adler, and I'm picturing Smart as Ozzy Osbourne for some reason.
No,
I I don't know why.
makes perfect sense, I think.
He's just giving me that vibe. Um,
And Blue is definitely a Jotun.
yeah, Blue is definitely a Jotun. Um, but yeah, I so what I think is gonna happen most likely is because it seems like I so I think what Jack's power is he can control like the flow of energy or like something along those lines. So he can like with the lights he
Interesting.
made them dim and then intensify.
Uh-huh.
And then in chapter 1
Yeah,
when he made the lights explode when he was mad. So I
yeah.
think what he's gonna do is he's gonna like fry like the chips in his blood.
That that's very interesting. I won't tell you if you're right or wrong.
Okay.
That is, I've never really had somebody guess that before. Like I've told them about the story, and like told them about like I've read a few pages for other people before. They've never said anything like that before. That is it's unique, which is
I don't know.
very good because it's
That's
the
just
imagination.
yeah.
Everyone's unique.
Yeah, that's just what I've gotten from it so far. I'm a big fan of the fact that Jason is an android. That
Yeah.
I feel like that makes sense. Cause I was thinking like like when he set off the alarm, I'm like, there's no way Jason is fucking packing heat right now. Like, there's no way
Nah,
he's
he
going
is
out
the
and
heat.
he is the heat.
He ain't packing heat. He is the heat.
He is packing. No, but yeah, um,
Oh, just wait till you
but
like
yeah,
just wait till you meet the inner circle. I think you'll love the inner circle because
dear
they're
God.
all awesome.
For some
Um,
reason, I feel like
and
the
then
inner circle is gonna be like the leaders of the Good Place from the Good Place. If you've seen that show,
the good place.
yeah.
No, they're not gonna be like
Ah.
that.
Where
They're
it's
actually gonna
just
be really good.
where it's like immediately they're like, okay, yep, you're the controller of everything now. Goodbye. So
No, they're
yeah.
not like that at all.
All right.
They're
Well, that's
actually
cool.
very well, I think they're very well developed and very unique. And I like all of them, even though not all of them are gonna be like the best characters. Like they're not gonna be 100%. Smart definitely has it out for for Jack. I'll
Yeah,
tell you that much.
definitely.
Like it's very obvious that Smart doesn't like Jack.
Mm.
But here, hold up. I'll give you a hint. Like I'll tell you their names if I can find them. Okay. Um, hold on. There's definitely somewhere where the inner circle is. Okay. So the inner circle members are Jonas Smart, Hovarth,
Hmm.
Prime,
Okay, that makes
uh
sense.
Virtua, uh Chi,
Oh,
and yeah. And then there's the mystery member after that. I won't tell you who the mystery member is. But yeah, so the members of the inner circle
so it,
are
so
in order. They're Hovarth. What?
who? No, aren't those the heroes from the comics Jack was reading?
Yes.
Oh,
Some
Pog.
of them.
Oh, so
Prime and
you
Chi
already know
and
Jack is gonna win
Hovarth.
him over because he's gonna be like, dude, I'm like your biggest fan or some shit. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's just the vibe I'm getting.
Just wait. Just wait.
No.
Okay, but yeah, no. Okay, so yeah, so there's Hovarth, there's Prime, there's Virtua, there's Chi, and then Jonas. There's Jonas Smart, and then there's a sixth member, but the sixth member is missing. So
Oh,
really, the inner
right,
circle
like
is only just
that
five
one
people.
dude that like Jason said. You mean like 12 years ago when I forgot his
Stendaval.
name went missing? Yeah.
Yes, yes, Stendaval.
So he went missing and
Yeah,
Smart
Stendaval
joined.
is missing. Yeah, he went missing a little around the same time that Smart joined, and that's when and that was like right after the whole Rustov thing happened. And
Hmm.
so, yeah, but yeah, so they're different. There are six different districts, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's okay, so frick, I always forget them. But I mean, there's Empire City, and there are six different districts. Here, hold up, I gotta get back to the beginning of the chapter. Shoot, where is it? Oh man, that was way far back. Okay, so there's friendship, visions. Okay, so there's Galaxis, which is the alien district,
Mm-hmm.
basically super futuristic sci-fi. And then
Yeah.
there's Karateka, which is like martial arts, ancient China, ninjas, kung fu masters.
Mm.
Then there's Varagog, which is all the medieval and fantasy and magic stuff. Then there's Cognito, where the streets had no names and the residents answered no questions.
Cognito.
So
That's
if
good.
you, yeah, yeah, Cognito. So basically, when you're incognito, you're incognito.
Mm. I feel like
Cognito
that's
is probably my
probably where.
favorite district.
I feel like that's probably where they're gonna have to go at some point.
Yeah, Cognito is my favorite district. It's just so cool. So like the way it works is that the streets, so everything about Cognito is constantly changing and constantly moving around. So
Mm.
like the street names always change, the building layouts always change, the neighborhood layouts always change, the streets always change, the signs always change. They just change. And sometimes like in the middle of the day as you're walking, you'll witness a change happen, right? But the
Mm-hmm.
people who live constantly in the district just kind of know where to go. Like if you want to get somewhere, you know where to go.
Mm.
And it's crazy. Like they reveal how it works like in the second book, but in the first book you're just left like wondering how does this work? But Cognito is probably the coolest one out of all of them.
Yeah.
And then
I mean,
there's
it sounds like
Machina.
it. Machina.
And then there's Machina, which is where Jason comes from. It's
Mm.
where androids and more robotic people and AI live. And that's where Virtua is from. Virtua, the Circle member. And let me just you remember when I said Jason has a waifu?
Jesus Christ. Okay.
It's Virtua.
Of course, it's Virtua.
No, no, Virtua is great though, and it's so funny too, because later on, because oh man, no, but that's a spoiler. Crap,
Mm.
that's a huge spoiler, but it's so funny, because like ah because okay, so basically they're in Machina, but like everything in Machina just kind of like it's basically made for machines and androids and all that. So it's really like uncomfortable for Jack to be there. So, but Virtua tries their best to like accommodate for Jack. Because Virtua is just like her physical form is just a hologram. She's an AI. So
Mm.
she has like a special drone that projects the hologram, right?
Yeah.
But Uh, but they're in a special room because they're trying to help Jack with his powers, and he does something with his powers that like he's done like he's like so used to it at this point, it's like second nature. And they're like, "You did what?" And he's like, "Yeah, I did this." And they're like, "What do you mean you did that?" And he's like, "I did it." And they're like, so that's a possible thing that you can do. And like they're just so confused by it, and it is the funniest thing in the world.
Mm. Yeah, because it seems like at this point Jack kind of figured out his whole thing.
Yeah, basically. And then I think in the next few chapters we get to meet Scarin and Allegra.
Mm.
I'm definitely giving Scarin a Scottish accent. There's no way I can't give him a Scottish accent. Scarin is like if Jack is Naruto, Scarin is Sasuke. But
Hmm.
funnily enough, Allegra isn't Sakura. She's Hinata.
Oh Christ.
Yeah, no, dude, chapter 5 is so short. Oh my goodness. Well, look short compared to what I just read. Hold up. Yeah, hold up. Jeez Louise. Yeah, no, no. Holy crap. Compared chapter 5 compared to chapter 4.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, see, I just yeah, no. Dude, chapter 4 is the same size as chapters 5 and 6.
Jesus
Like
Christ.
chapters 5 and 6 together. So yeah, so we can do 5, 6 and possibly 7.
This book is a
Oh,
certified hood classic.
it is, and it's so slept on, and I wish it was popular. It's literally just 3 books, but like I just wish it became more popular. Well, this has been the Stupid Stuff Book Club. I am your host, Tan Tan the Tan Man, and I hope you have a very Tan Tan Pog day. Next time.